Hey there, thanks for stopping by. I'm Thomas, and no, you didn't misclick. This is Zarbo Audio Projects. Welcome to the very first Tom's Toolbox. I plan on doing these from time to time, as tools are an integral part of creating any audio project, especially a tool like this one. Today we're going to take a look at the Shelton Versatool. It is a ratcheting screwdriver with 3 bits that fold away to make a fairly compact tool. My example is brand new and never used. It still even has the original oil on it to lubricate the central shaft and slide out bits. There were several different versions of this basic tool, but this one has 3 fold out bits, 2 flathead bits and 1 Phillips bit. Other versions had 4 bits, which you can see from this original patent drawing. You could either have 4 various size flathead bits or 1 Phillips and 2 flathead bits, since the Phillips bit took up additional space due to its increased width. The artwork on the box is kind of cool. 2 sides feature the name of the tool in either white or red lettering. The 3rd side shows a roughly 2/3 size picture of the tool with its bits visible so you can see what you're getting. And the 4th side describes some of its features, its biggest being the ratcheting head, which will tighten, loosen, or lock in place. The box mentions the tool steel blades being for slotted or recessed head screws. I guess the word Phillips hadn't caught on yet in the 1950s and 60s. Even the ends of the box have some exciting lettering on it. You know, maybe it's me, but I think the artwork on this box is a lot more interesting and clear than many modern things you might buy even today. Even without my reading glasses, I can see everything on this box pretty clearly. It's just inviting to look at. I think it would stand out in a display case by a cash register in a 1960s hardware store. I know I'd probably spring for one. I can't seem to resist a good ratcheting screwdriver even now. Well, let's take a look at how this functions. You switch from tighten to loosen by pulling back this tiny little bolt action peg. Tighty to the righty and loosey when it's lefty. It locks to non-ratcheting by setting the bolt to the middle position. When locked, the head shows very little play. I think many modern ratcheting screwdrivers aren't quite this tight. The center section stores the hinged bits which slide into the handle. When you pull it out far enough, the tools are free to swing out to be used in a straight or offset configuration. The unused bits can then be slid back into the handle, making the tool ready for use. So yes, the design of the screwdriver allows for use in an offset position for extra leverage, it says. Yeah, I can see that helping get some extra power delivered. The flathead bits have this built-in notch in both sides. I think that it's supposed to catch on the body of the screwdriver if it slips out of position, preventing you from smashing your hand against whatever you're working on. It would only allow the bit to change the angle only so much. Strangely though, the Phillips bit does not have that feature. The flathead bits are about 2 millimeters thick, and the Phillips is 4 millimeters thick. The bits themselves are somewhat snug in this pivoting setup, but this is a new unit, and I can attest to the fact that if it's used fairly often, these bits move much more freely. It seems fairly robust in its construction, and I would think that you'd be able to put some pretty good torque through it as long as the bits themselves stayed in the screw head. I tried the straight bits, and they seemed mostly okay. These bits do have a bit more taper to them than modern flathead screwdriver tips, but I'm honestly not a big fan of straight bits in general. I usually only use them when I'm screwing in wall plates, so I'm not the best judge of flathead screw performance. But the Phillips bit does have some issues. It didn't really fit well in any of the Phillips screws that I used. I tried it in my standard number 6 and number 8 black oxide speaker mounting screws and some various drywall screws as well. It just didn't seem to fit very snugly in any of them. Now that could be due to the fact that there are several Phillips profiles, and there are even screws that look like Phillips that actually aren't. Pause the drive, I'm looking at you. Phillips screws were being used by the 1940s and 50s, so they did exist, but that doesn't mean that every screwdriver had the optimal profile to seat fully in any given Phillips screw. This Phillips head seems to have more pointed tip, where most modern Phillips screwdrivers have a flat portion at the very tip. That allows for the 4 flutes to sit tighter in the screw head, but either way, this Phillips bit didn't want to seat correctly in any of my Phillips screws, so I think trying to use it today would be difficult for anything requiring any amount of torque. Perhaps if you were so inclined, this bit could be modified a bit to sit a touch deeper in modern Phillips screw heads. You can tell from the packaging and the tool construction itself that this thing is fairly old. The original patent was applied for by Raymond P. Lavietes of Shelton, Connecticut in July of 1949, and that patent was granted in December of 1953, over 4 years later. Oh, I guess government didn't move any faster back then than it does now. My example is probably from the early 1970s. I like it when companies use their business location as a product or brand name. I assume that this was called the Shelton Versatool after the town of Shelton, Connecticut, where Lavietes ran his two businesses, the Shelton Products Company and the Shelton Basket Company. I guess they were trying to market to the guys and the gals when it came to the products that they wanted to sell. These things were often used as promotional tools, and the one that I have has the words Nikolai Vodka printed on the head in gold letters. At first, I suspected that the lettering would wear off fairly quickly if you actually used this thing with any frequency, because the black ratcheting part is exactly where you would put your grimy palm to apply pressure to whatever fastener you were trying to turn. And I think the gold would wear away eventually, but the lettering is actually indented as well as printed, so it may have actually lasted a bit longer than I originally suspected. Here are some other versions of this tool with various advertisements imprinted on them. It seemed like this was as much a marketing tool as it was a tool. Pretty smart, actually. I think it was a bit ahead of its time in that respect. So here's a kind of funny observation. In twisting the head on this, I noticed that the mechanism is pretty coarse. And by coarse, I mean that it only clicks 6 times to make a full rotation. If my math's right, that's 60 degrees per click. These days, manufacturers like to point out how little rotation is needed to get that next click on the tool. For ratchet wrenches, this is kind of important depending on where you're using it. If it's in a crowded engine bay, for instance, where there's minimal room to move, a shallow degree of motion is super important. Probably not quite as much for basic ratcheting screwdriver use, but man, 60 degrees per click? We sure have progressed, haven't we? They sell used and new old stock units of this for anywhere from $13 to $35 on eBay, and there are lots of new units out there. I guess they just made a ton of these things. Probably a large percentage of those screwdrivers that were manufactured had advertising on the plastic handles to customize them for various businesses, and I guess that made them pretty popular as an advertising item. Here's one with a beat-up box, but it has a smaller Phillips bit than mine. They did do different versions of this over the years. I imagine it wouldn't be hard or expensive to change the bits for various types of fasteners. Had they stuck around long enough, I guess they might have made lots of different versions based on different screw types that were popular over the years. I could see an Allen head or Torx bit along with a Phillips, or maybe they could make one with several highly specialized bits for use by a specific industry, for example. It was a fairly unique tool for the day. Back in the 1950s when it first came out, this thing would have been nearly groundbreaking. Although we would consider this tool pretty archaic by today's standards, back then tools were not very ergonomic at all. And although this thing isn't what I'd call comfy to use, it's not really bad once you adapt and figure out how to hold it properly. The grip is a little different than a normal screwdriver. You have to grip harder on the plastic head to hold it tight enough to get much force behind it. And I tried several different styles of grip in order to see what felt comfortable and stable. Trying to hold the metal part tightly is just too slippery to do much work. I ended up using my 2 smallest fingers to kind of hold the ratcheting part while I spun it, and that seemed to be fairly effective. It is not as ergonomic as a modern driver with a full ratcheting handle, that is certain, but you can get work done with it. And again, we have to remember that this was designed with 1960s fasteners and ergonomics in mind. Well, I hope you enjoyed this brief look at the history of this interesting and fairly ubiquitous tool. Let me know if this video appealed to you. I hope to do videos like this now and again, highlighting various tools that I think are interesting, unique, or just plain useful. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll catch you next time. Bye now.